Take yourself out of the way you've thought about muscle previously. It's a protective tissue. That's how I like to describe it. It's a protective tissue,
Mm,
not just physically. If you look at the data on head injuries from car crashes and concussions, generally speaking, if you look at neck circumference or you look at
mm,
muscle mass in the neck, it can reduce your risk of concussion or serious brain trauma, which
mm.
is quite interesting. So, in that sense, yes, it's a protective tissue,
Yep.
but it's protective on a cellular level, as you've already
Mm,
touched on. In
absolutely.
terms of something which is like at the moment, we've got a massive epidemic of obesity and diabetes, which is
Mm.
unfortunately is now plaguing younger people like myself too.
Welcome to the Root Cause Revolution, where we go beyond band-aids and ask what's really driving your symptoms. I'm Dr. Stefan Neff, a former anesthetist turned functional medicine doctor, and this show is all about getting curious, digging deeper, and reclaiming your health from the ground up. Just so you know, nothing you hear on this podcast is medical advice. It's here to inform and inspire. Please talk to your doctor or a trusted functional medicine practitioner before making any changes to your health.
Today, I've got actually a friend on my show. Alex Ewen is a personal trainer and coach who indeed was friends with my children. They sort of all grew up together, and I've had the privilege of seeing him progressing and growing and blooming, and it was a beautiful journey. And nowadays, this man is here and he has developed his own mind as far as the benefits of physical training are concerned. He's going out there with his system Strive 20, which makes a hell of a lot of sense for so many of us. Those of us who say, well, I'm too busy. And look at me, for God, I'm 50. What the hell shall I do training? Do you think I will be Schwarzenegger when I go to the gym? No. And, all the excuses why we don't engage in exercise. And we want to strip all this bullshit away today. So, Alex Ewan, welcome to my show.
Thank you for having me on, Stefan. My goodness, it's a bit awkward, honestly. It's my first time on a podcast, so for the viewers listening or
Oh,
listeners listening, then honestly, like, give me some slack. Like, I'm gonna do my best on this one. But thank you for having me on, Stefan. As you said, like,
absolutely.
I've known you and your kids for quite some time, so it feels like almost a strange full circle moment being on here. It's like, well, gone from like being 8 years old, hanging out with Lars, now I'm on a podcast with you. It's like, holy crap, this is
Exactly.
awesome. But
But that just shows the transformation that we all are able to undergo. And when you're young, of course, it is much easier because you put your mind to it and you go all out. And
mm,
not necessarily all these kind of pressures of marriage, children, jobs, etc. So when you're younger, you can really throw yourself into it. And that
oh
was
yeah.
really your journey, wasn't it? You
Mm.
just took it up like nothing.
Yeah,
What initially, I mean, when you were younger, what drove you? What you
it's a
were at the gym
really,
all the
really good
time?
question.
Yeah.
I've had so many people ask me the same thing. To be honest, I think the answer will disappoint many. I actually don't know what got me so into it, Stefan. It was, I remember it quite well. So I was about
Okay.
14 years old. I think I just turned 14. So I'm a fresh 14-year-old walking into the high school gym. Go and talk to Mr. Clark and I said, can I have a membership? And he went, yeah, okay. So they handed me a membership. Next thing you know, I was in there almost every single lunchtime. It was just like, let me try this new machine out, or let me go and do this. And of course, that very naturally progressed into something that could be classified as an obsession over the course of about a year from that point forward. So it's not very often you get someone at that age bracket, or perhaps going into something so vigorously, doing something so often. You do see it in young athletes too. You see kids get hooked on rugby or soccer or whatever their sport of choice might be. It just happened to be that even though I was playing sport at quite a high level, doing hockey, I just found the gym to be far more enjoyable. But then over time, it started to, as I'm sure we'll get into, there was a few, more insidious things started to creep in, which we've started to see across, I hate to say it, but the majority of the gym population too. There's a number of things that sort of rear their ugly head over time, but as you say,
But
threw myself into it and didn't look back.
but that's a beautiful thing. I mean, that's one of these really kind of positive coping mechanisms to whatever life has thrown you. And I certainly, when I remember back, I had a gang assault at age 13. And prior to that, I was a chubby little teenager. Not too bad, but yeah, just a bit on the molly side. And then I brought this dude behind bars. He threatened to kill me, and I threw myself into martial arts. So school, then 3 times a week, stacking shelves somewhere in a supermarket. And when I was not doing that, I was working out 3, 4 hours every night.
Oh
talk
wow.
about talk about really throwing yourself at it. And my body changed, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I became Rambo. So but the reason that I did that, I ran away from my emotions. I ran away from
Yes.
my
Yeah.
PTSD. I ran
Mm,
away from a lot of things, I guess.
mm.
Without going into too many details, was there an element of escapism there as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Like, I think the best way I can put it is school was never really a friendly place, I must say. It was like, not to make it seem like it was, the poor kid getting bullied in the back of the
Yeah,
classroom. It wasn't really like that. It was more just feeling alien most of the time.
yeah,
And in a strange way, going down to that weights room was incredibly peaceful. I could put on a pair of headphones, wear the clothes that I wanted to wear that didn't feel funny like the school uniform, or
yeah.
and just do my thing without really any eyes of judgment. And then, of course, as you progress later on, like I'm sure you probably found this too, you reach a point where people start asking questions, going like, well, how did you do that, or how did you do this? And you're going, well, I don't feel qualified in the slightest to tell you what I did right because I'm not even sure myself. I think there's a level of uncertainty that comes with it. But yeah, there was definitely that level of escapism going in there because, to be fair, I just didn't enjoy school that much. It wasn't that I did bad or anything. It was more just like, well, prefer to be here than over here. It was
Exactly.
the best
Oh
way I can
man.
put it.
And you were saying, well, I didn't enjoy school, but I have got to know you. You are a
Mm.
nerd. You are into science big time. I guess
Yeah.
the school did just not deliver it in the way that your brain took it on, and that you are now able to
Mm.
actually formulate quite complex things into a very
Yeah.
simple approach when it comes to helping your clients. So many of us later in life, we come back
Mm.
to exercise as a means of achieving this elusive kind of thing. May that
Mm.
be trying to go back in time to your 20s when you were fit and young and strapping,
Yes.
or that you want to lose weight. And well, why do you want to lose weight? Well, because you feel empty inside, or there's no
Yeah.
love in your life, etc. These are
Mm.
very different things that people strive and to get
Mm.
to achieve, and they might not necessarily be found in a gym.
That's
Why
good.
the hell should a 50, I mean, in my case, I'm 58. You know, I
Mm.
should go for retirement. I should, just
Mm.
put my feet up, rest, take it easy, cup of tea in the hand. What? It makes me come a little bit of vomit up the moment I say that. It's so not me. But why?
Yeah.
What is
Well,
the importance of that?
in terms of why we should go to the gym, perhaps I would suggest rephrasing that into why should we all exercise? I don't like to keep people contained to thinking a gym is the only place where they can improve
Okay.
themselves and get movement in. There's so many different things that people can do. So if we say everyone should be moving a little bit more, that's probably a little bit closer to what I would be suggesting. As far as the gym, if you want to go to the gym and lift some weights, go for it. And I can give you a million and one reasons as to why that's probably a good idea for you. If you also want to go for a swim and you say, hey, I just want to go do some light activity, I perhaps want to live a few years longer as I'm getting into the later stages of my life, there's nothing wrong with that. And I also don't want people thinking that there's a right way to do it. There's a right way to do it for you. There's essentially the line between the line between what you need to do and essentially what everyone else tells you you should do. It can seem very small, but quite often it's a big gap because everyone seems to have the right idea. I'll be the first
Sure.
person to tell you that until I've sat down with someone for at least half an hour, even sometimes hours on ends, that's only when I can be like, hey, this might be the great, approach for you,
Exactly.
because there's just so many individual variables. But in the case of why
Absolutely.
everyone should be moving, I mean, goodness, you're a doctor, Stefan. I'm sure you know this already, but
And
it's like
indeed,
it's
let's be
yeah,
very clear. At
it's
the moment, we have got out there, it's an epidemic of sedentary lifestyle. We
yeah,
now have got the data that is very clear that sedentary lifestyle is the new smoking. So
mm,
if you smoke a pack a day, that is the
mm,
same impact on your health as sedentary lifestyle means not
yes, yeah,
being active and being exercising. Now we need to be clear. We need to probably break it a bit down because there is activity in daily life and then
yes,
there
yeah,
is exercise.
yeah.
So, do you distinguish between them when you assess your patients, or what's about to say your clients? How do you think
Yes, yeah.
about these two things?
That's a great question. There's typically two things I'm looking at. And so you can apply this to yourself. It's also a great like self-assessment tool. There's two things we're looking for, as you say. We're looking for exercise, first of all. Exercise is any time that you set aside to intentionally go and move. That exercise could be going for a walk. It could be going to the gym to lift some weights. It could be going for a swim in the lake. It could be pretty much anything you can think of. If you have to block out time for it and you have to put some thought into what I'm going to be doing, I don't know why I'm swimming in the air, but if you have to put some thought in there and some thought into it and so a little bit of planning there, then I would say that counts as exercise. So when someone says I walk to go get my coffee in the morning, if they're like, I'm planning that walk out, that's okay, that's some exercise. Great. It's just more of a classification thing. Then there's a separate category as we sort of go down the four things I'll get into, which is needs. I'm sure you've heard of this, but non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So all of these hand movements that I'm making, my nostrils twitching, all the weird little movements that I do, that classifies as needs, which is essentially movement, but it's not conscious. It's fidgeting at your desk. It's perhaps walking from your fridge to your couch. You know, that's essentially not thought of movement. It's subconscious, but it's still part of your day. And that, believe it or not, makes up a much larger percentage of your daily caloric burn than exercise.
Absolutely.
So generally speaking, if you're the average person, and let's say you go to the gym 3 times a week, and you're getting, just for a metric's sake, around 6,000 to 7,000 steps a day, you're probably only burning around 5%, maybe 10% if you're really going at it during that time that you're in the gym. The rest of it is going to come from your basal metabolic rate. That's around 60 to 70% for most people. That's just keeping the lights on. So if I put you into a coma, Stefan, and was like leaving you there, that's what you would be burning. Your BMR is essentially your baseline number that you absolutely must maintain. And so anything on top of that, it's a tiny percentage. It's a small fraction of your total daily energy expenditure.
That's a great thing
Yeah,
to say that,
it's-
because we can actually work on all of these things. When we look at living
Yes.
healthier lives, we can work on our basic metabolic rate by maybe looking at our hormones, how well they are controlled,
Yes.
by
Yeah.
looking at our fire rate, by optimizing a lot of things in our life. That's where the functional medicine specialist comes in.
Yeah.
The activity, now that is the 20-25%, and that's on top of the basic metabolic rate. That's where you are in control in your daily life. And there's so much we can do, and that's so beautiful. And then there is the exercise, so beautifully laid out. What are the goals that you look out for? I've got sort of 4 directions in my mind when I think about us living our healthiest way. What are sort of the principles, the goals that we should be able to achieve throughout our life?
That's a really, really good question. My God, you're going right at it. In terms of general goals, it's different for everyone. It's different across age categories too. So what I would be telling a 25-year-old to focus on versus a 75-year-old to focus on would be quite different, but it's more so just due to starting place. Generally speaking, there's a couple of things that would be quite important to do as a human being, just living your daily life, which if you need to use exercise as a tool to reach this stage, it's fantastic. But for most of us, it won't be the case. But that's things like being able to get off the floor unassisted. Like, can you sit down onto your bum with your heels crossed in front of you? And are you able to keep your hands off the ground and get yourself up? Be amazed at how many young people now cannot do that. It never used to be a problem. If you go to a third world country and they're eating their food, what position are they in, Stefan?
They're in a deep squat.
They're in a deep squat. And so you look at people the same age in New Zealand or another Western country, you tend to see just because we're in a sedentary lifestyle, we end up having to combat that with exercise because, of course, less movement throughout the day. We need to do a bit more. So for younger people, I would say that's probably a great place to start. Is just assess your general function. First place would be, as I said, get off the floor. See how you do with that. You might surprise yourself. How good is your balance? That gets far more important as you get older.
Very good.
But if you can stand on one leg, and you can do that for, say, if you're a younger person, say between 25 and 40, let's just say, if you can do that anywhere from like 20 to 60 seconds, I'll be amazed if you could do it for 60 seconds. That's pretty awesome. Be amazed at how many people will do that on one leg. Most people, if they try and do that for the first time, and I've seen this with clients time and time again, you get them in to do their first balance assessment. You stand on one leg, within 2 seconds, they're tumbling over. And it's like, you know, I almost feel really bad for people because it's just not something you tend to think of until you're 65 and you fall down the stairs and then you end up needing not intensive care, but perhaps you need a lot more attention than you previously did just because your function's gone. So that's something I'd say. It's just like be honest and brutally aware of where you're at. That can be quite a hard thing to do. That can require a lot of confrontation with your inner self. That can require a lot of looking at yourself quite harshly in a sense of, oh wow, I'm in this place. This is where I thought I was in my mind. This is the distance. And that distance is correlated very well with the amount of shittiness you feel. It's going to be, if you think you're really strong and then your PT goes, hey, let's test your Harvard step test and then we'll do a 1 rep max or something, then if it's not what you wanted it to be, it can tend to feel quite shitty. So if you're going into this and you've never done exercise before, I'll just tell that to you straight. It's gonna suck sometimes seeing how bad you are at things. But if you're really bad at something, there's a lot of room for improvement there. That's a different way of looking at it. It was about 3 years back. I realized that my, despite the fact that I could squat some pretty obscenely heavy weight for my body weight, my hip mobility was shot. It was awful. And I only realized that after another PT, a good friend of mine, tested me and said, let's see what your hip mobility is like. And I was in the bottom fit. I was like the 5 percentile. I was like this. I was right down the bottom in terms of my hips just being completely locked up. It was like, oh, wow, this sucks. I'm young. I shouldn't be in this position.
That's beautiful. That's the reality check that we all need.
Yeah.
That's why I love to hear your answer there, because I paid different attention throughout my lifespan to different aspects there. And so it's cool. So we've got mobility, number one, our balance.
Most people would be thinking I'll be going straight into strength training. Just if you know me on a personal level, people will know that that's definitely a special interest in that regard. But the more that I've looked into it, the more I've realized I've had to change my way of thinking on it, just because it seems to me that it's quite overwhelming in the evidence that having sufficient zone 2 cardio performance is incredibly important. I would put that there as more of a precautionary tale, and the reason I say that is because most people hear cardio is a good thing to do, and then they equate that to, that's how I'm going to lose my gut, and that's how people end up on treadmills for 3 hours at a time wondering, I've lost all of this weight and yet I still don't like the way that I look or feel, and there's 1,001 reasons for that. But what I will say is that there is, generally speaking, there's a baseline of cardio that would make you healthier. There's a baseline there where if you're able to sustain a moderate intensity of cardio, that's generally going to be a good thing to aim to. Even if you're able to, say, run for 2 kilometers, if you're able to do that without pain or without getting too winded, that's fantastic, that's great. More so, I'd say that if there's activities that you enjoy doing, such as swimming or like mountain biking or skiing, things of the sorts, and you find yourself progressively becoming more exhausted just trying to perform those activities, it might be a sign that you need to look into that for yourself. But generally speaking, people can get away with a lot less than what we've previously been told. That's something just to keep in mind. Previously, it was, as I'm sure you were, I wasn't even alive in the freaking 80s, but as I'm sure you saw, it was spin classes and Zumba, and that was what was marketed to us as the way to lose weight, to feel healthy. I tend to disagree with that, just for a number of reasons.
No, my friend, you're talking apples and pears, because on the one hand, you've had all this marketing drive. And this is money making in the best possible thing. You work on the weaknesses of someone, and you give them a solution that somehow miraculously makes them fine. I mean, I remember 20, 30 years ago, I've no clue if that is still there, this kind of late night, sort of 12, 1, 2 o'clock, you get those infomercials. And inevitably there is a kind of a thing to help you to do sit-ups, and then there is something there to actually help you bend something, and a heap of shit. But it's money making. And
absolutely.
So please, let's just accept that there is a whole lot of charlatans out there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, and we are here to actually cut through that bullshit, because we want to actually to know, well, let's work on the goals. So we set the balance, and we set the mobility in its own right. But I do believe strength and cardio both have very important places. So the cardio, you were saying, basically rev up your heart rate to a level that for your age group is appropriate to really get you into kind of an aerobic exchange. So that's the kind of zone 2 is you working aerobically. If you then push your heart rate higher and higher and you're breathing higher and higher, you come to an anaerobic state where basically the oxygen that comes in is no longer enough, and you're starting to build up now lactic acid, and the body tries to get energy from wherever it can. That's where you then get the sore muscles the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good breakdown. If you're looking at cardio, and this is important for most people, unless you're just absurdly ultra fit as is, in which case keep doing what you're doing great. Aerobic and anaerobic exercise. Notice I didn't say cardio, because you can be doing exercise that isn't necessarily cardiovascular, which will place you in an anaerobic state, and vice versa. Sometimes it can be quite confusing, but generally we've got, if we're talking cardio, aerobic and anaerobic. You can remember as aerobic as being air. You can just think of my body has got enough oxygen coming in because I'm not so gassed from going super hard, and therefore my body's able to create the energy that it needs using oxygen as one of the substrates for that. So examples of that being gently walking around the block, that's aerobic exercise. I'd be a little bit concerned if you said you came back from a walk and we were like, my legs are burning, I've got this lactate out. I'll be like, okay, this is going to be fun.
Exactly. You've got a long way to improve. Congratulations.
Like, the good news is it should happen quite quickly if you stay with it.
True.
In the case of aerobic exercise, there's a couple of applications of that just make sense depending on the person. So if you're someone who really enjoys going for a run, it might be a great form of exercise for you. And there's plenty of health benefits that could come with that. For the average person, and what the general guidelines are, is you're looking at around 150 minutes a week of zone 2 to maybe verging on zone 3 cardio, probably not going a little bit more than that. When we say zones, by the way, for the listeners listening to this, if you look up zone chart for cardio, you'll be able to see that there's essentially a chart which essentially reflects average heart rates, and that gives you zones. So if your heart rate, say for my age being 21, you might have a heart rate of 125, and that would place you roughly beginning into zone 2. It's something very useful. You have it on all of the walls at the gym. So it's like when you're taking someone in for a consult, it's there. You can show them and explain it to them. Hey, this is what I'm meaning when I say we're going to do zone 2 cardio this week for one of your sessions. It's just a good thing to keep in mind. You can also think of it as like chopping and changing tools. So if you're like, I need to do some cardio this week, well, I can either do 2 zone 2 sessions, or I can do one slightly more intense, zone 3 to zone 4 session. It's just a different way of thinking of it. But in terms of what you'll get out of that, there's plenty of benefits. You're going to feel a lot fitter just in general. You're probably not going to feel as gassed walking up a flight of stairs. You'll be able to keep up with all of your friends and relatives when they say, hey, let's go for a hike someplace, or let's go on a walk somewhere. There's lots of general living benefits that come with that. So I want people to take their mindset out of how long can I run on the treadmill, or how long can I go for a run, because it seems everyone's fucking obsessed with running these days. There's definitely been a resurgence of that with COVID, which I won't get into, but generally speaking, it's a great idea for most people. But what I will caution people on is try not to make it the cornerstone of a healthy lifestyle and routine. What I mean by that is kind of why I called the business Strive, is strength training results in vitality every day. That's it. What I've seen in my experience, and what is now emerging, is quite, I don't want to say conclusive, but it's very strong evidence that strength training tends to give us the best of both worlds. And that is something that was hotly debated, I suppose, coming out of the 2000s. There was a lot of discussion about like how does strength training apply to the average person, and not just these steroided up bodybuilders essentially. But from that literature, I can tell the listeners right now that strength training is borderline magical in the effects that it has on the human body. Absolutely. With very little doses. And that's quite exciting for people if they think, well, I'm not someone who particularly enjoys exercise for whatever reason. If you tell them that if you just do an hour of strength training every week, you can reduce your all-cause mortality risk by tenfold or somewhere close. That's quite incredible. So if you take someone like yourself, Stefan, if you, of course, you've got your background in training, but if you would come in for a consultation, I would be introducing you to strength training.
Absolutely.
Not far before, but I'll be introducing it to you before we get on the cardio machine. Absolutely. It's so important for the average person looking to regain function, to look good, because we do all want to look a little bit better than we do, to feel good, managing blood sugar, managing mobility, independence as you age. There's so many things that go into that.
I believe that we also in medicine are beginning to appreciate now is that the muscle is a very active endocrine organ, that it is so involved in glucose metabolism, i.e., that is what you want to do when you are talking about management of diabetes or reversal of diabetes.
Yes.
When we are talking about the management of dementia or prevention of dementia. Dementia, as far as I'm concerned, is a largely preventable disease. It's your choice if you get Alzheimer's or not. I think, and that's an extreme saying. I mean, 10 years ago, I would have been
Yeah.
flogged for that. Nowadays, we have got more and more
Yeah,
the
nowadays
understanding that it
that's
is
yeah,
there.
much more accepted. I've even heard Alzheimer's being described as type 3 diabetes. Of
That's
course,
exactly it.
I'm
Yeah,
not a doctor, so we'll just preface that to
yeah.
people.
No,
I'm
no,
not an
and
expert on diabetes, but
You're
regardless,
right.
it's
You're absolutely right. We
yeah,
have got a choice by using our body in such a way, training in such a way that we minimize the impact of other things in our life, the stress, external influences that we can't control. But we
yeah,
can control our resilience by building up muscle. And
yes, yeah,
the sad thing is, from about 30 years on, the average man and woman lose about 2 to 8% of muscle per decade. Now that's I don't know where this figure actually comes from, but it's something that is sort of more or less accepted. I think this should no longer be considered true because we have got the choice to change that. Do you
yeah.
see that differently?
No, I think you're pretty much on the money there. I mean, the tools available to people now, I mean, like even 25 years ago at the turn of the century, the stuff you've got available at your fingertips was just not a thing. Like there was a good reason you'd have to go see a personal trainer and you just have to cross your fingers and bloody hope that you got a good one because quite frankly, when everyone's uninformed, like a slightly more informed person will seem like an expert. But
Ooh,
generally, it's
ouch.
like, yeah. But generally speaking, what I like to tell clients in front of me, take yourself out of the way you've thought about muscle previously. It's a protective tissue. That's how I like to describe it. It's a protective tissue, not just physically. If you look at the data on head injuries from car crashes and concussions, if you look at neck circumference or you look at muscle mass in the neck, it can reduce your risk of concussion or serious brain trauma, which is quite interesting. So in that sense, yes, it's a protective tissue,
Yep,
but it's protective on a cellular level, as you've already touched on. In
absolutely.
terms of something which is like at the moment, we've got a massive epidemic of obesity and diabetes, which is unfortunately is now plaguing younger people like myself too. Number of teenagers developing pre-diabetes has been on the rise for a good
Absolutely.
few years now,
Yep. Yes, it has.
which is quite interesting. So we look at a little bit of a we look at environmentally speaking, we're becoming more and more sedentary. So our movement as a whole is just coming down and down and down as we get more
Yeah,
confined into small spaces and chairs. And our food intake has been going up and up and up. The
absolutely.
amount of calories we're all eating. So if you look at that environment and you go, well, shit, there isn't much I can do here in terms of changing the world unless you decide to become very radical about how you might approach that. There's not much you can do about it on the macro scale, but if you look at it individually on a scale, what tools do I have
Absolutely.
available to me to make myself healthier and a better person for the world? Building muscle would probably be at the top of that list in terms of looking at ways to exercise related. Reason being, if you build more muscle, your blood sugar management will generally be better. We never used to look at it like that. We used to just see muscles as being the mechanical component that allowed us to move, and that was it. Most people don't even realize that the reason you get cramps, for example, is due to a depletion of substrates that allow for the creation of energy. Just because you're letting a muscle down does not mean that it is just resting and stretching. That is also an eccentric contraction. It requires energy. So I need you to think about your muscles as being not only incredibly active, but also being like your body's essentially. Think of it in terms of working more hours to make more money or investing. Think of it like that. Be like, hey, Jenny, you want to lose 20 kilograms? Okay, we can put you on a treadmill for 3 hours a day. Yes, you're going to burn more calories, and yes, your body's going to start pulling those fat reserves out to fuel that activity. You can, on the other hand, look at doing a little bit of that because there's nothing wrong with it in principle. But if you look at your muscles, think of adding on an extra 20 pounds or about 9-ish kilograms of muscle to your frame. That is an extra roughly 250 calories a day that you didn't have to think about. You didn't have to earn through exercise. It
Indeed.
just happens. So think for the average person who's a little bit of a couch potato, oh,
Exactly.
crap, I can just build a bit of muscle and then it's wow. And so there's a lot of
Yeah.
misconceptions that come with that because something I'm quite big on is, of course, with bodybuilding and strength athletes, don't get me wrong, they've brought a lot of great things to the world. They've also brought a lot of shit, and that really gets me going because a number of times, Stefan, honestly, I'd be a millionaire if I had $1 for every time someone has said to me either, I don't want to get too big or I don't want to have bulky looking muscles. To answer the first one, well, if that did happen, you would have a really good problem on your hands and you could just not do as much. Great for you. It's like if you happen to be one of the one in 1 billion people who builds muscle too quickly, if you look up Ronnie Coleman is a great example of that. Uh, that's not exactly a big problem, but I'd like to have that problem myself. So you can hand it over anytime you like. But in terms of people saying as well, there's words like toned that come out. There's words like bulky muscles. I don't want that. It's generally because people are conflating a health outcome with an aesthetics outcome. As people are looking, well, I want to be healthy, and this trainer's telling me I need to build some muscle. Fantastic, I can accept that's probably a good thing for me to do. But then with that comes this pre-tied misconception of, well, if I build muscle, I'm going to look like that. They've got an image of a bodybuilder or a physique athlete in their head. So I have to say, some people dedicate their entire lives to looking like that. Coming to see me for once or twice a week, it's probably not going to happen. But that sort of ties into as well, I'll get to later in terms of the health and aesthetics thing. But in terms of what muscle can do for you, the answer is, well, a hell of a lot. You're going to be moving better. You're going to be looking better, feeling better. Things even down to, like, for example, postprandial blood sugar. So if you're looking at someone who's just consumed a meal, someone who's got, so we've got twins, this person's got an extra 20 kilos of muscle, this person's just like baseline, ad libitum. If you feed them the same meal, the blood sugar response is going to be vastly different in the person who's got a more favorable body composition. So over time, what you'll be looking for is to gradually reduce your body fat. That comes through intelligent exercise and also sustainable nutrition habits. I think people don't realize how little control in general they have over their body weight. In the sense that if you look at the data and how many people go on these massive diets and then regain all the weight again, plus more, it's the vast majority of people.
Let's say you go really aggressive and you lose a lot of weight. You typically lose about 50% muscle, 50% fat. The sad thing is you come off those drugs or you come off that particular diet, whatever that was.
That muscle's not coming back.
No, that's it. Yeah, but your weight is coming back. Often you go back to baseline or close to it. But instead of going back up 50-50, no, you're going up 80% fat, 20% muscle, which basically means now you're at a net loss. After those 6 months, you maybe looked for a little short time much, much better. And good on you for having those great pictures of your wedding in that lovely dress. But from a health point of view, you really cut yourself deep into your own flesh.
Yep.
And now that we say muscle is so important for everything from mitochondrial wellness to our mental health, for crying out loud. There's different data out there. Some things are a little bit better for anxiety, i.e. aerobic versus weight training. But ultimately, both of them are very good to help you. You love the weight training, but you also experienced at a very young age that you can overdo things. So let's talk a little bit about overtraining and how much that played a role in your life. And if that is a fear for someone like me, who now wants to start some weight training, and I have heard about this overtraining, is that an issue?
It's a good question. Is overtraining an issue? For the majority of people, it's hard to say really, but put it this way, when you spend a lot of times in gyms, you tend to get to know the general archetype of person that's in there. So if you walked into any gym, any big box gym, and you've got a room of 100 people, I could probably guess that around 60 of those people, for themselves, are classified as overdoing it. They're overtraining. I think there's probably a few things we can get into there, but in terms of whether that's something that someone like yourself could worry about, yes, absolutely. But there's a certain way that I want you to worry about it. And this sort of comes down to how I try to communicate signaling to people. Think of like an old school tuner radio, not like the ones in your car that are automatic, but a proper tuner radio where you've got to tune into the station you want. And you know the number that you need. So let's say you need 101 and you're currently at 107 and there's a bunch of noise. You can just hear a few bits and pieces. You don't turn the volume up. That's not how you get to the right station. You don't just crank the volume up. That's what most people tend to do with exercise. But I need people to think of exercise as being a signaling process. Think of it as like the tuning knob on your radio.
Nice.
Let's say, for example, you're looking to build a bit of muscle. It's probably not sensible for you to then be doing 5 Zumba classes and touching the weights for 10 minutes and being like, okay, well, I think I'm on the right track here. It's like, okay, what was the signal that you sent your body? Well, think of it as like what the body's going to be thinking. Okay, this guy's got us moving heaps. He's got us moving for an hour at a time with a pretty good intensity, sustained duration and sustained intensity. It's not so much glycolytically demanding. In other words, it's not using glucose or glycogen within the muscles as much. It tends to be more of an aerobic process like we talked about before. So a lot of aerobic movement. We're not getting fed during that time either. Like we're not taking anything in. And so how are we going to get better at that? You need to keep in mind that your body is trying to find a way to get better at the stimuli that you're giving it. So in this case, if it's cardio, it's trying to get better at doing more cardio. So how does it do that? Well, it's going to down-regulate muscle mass. Because why do you need a whole bunch of heavy muscle as if you're trying to run? Doesn't really make sense if you're evolutionarily, if you go down that route. But if we look at strength training, it's a very different signal. It's a signal of he's getting us to pick up heavy things or moving heavy objects through resistance a few times before resting and doing it again and again. But that signaling process goes, we need to get much stronger. Your body can get stronger without building muscle up to a limit just because it gets better at doing the thing. Like if you play any instrument, any musician can tell you that without learning any extra theory, all they had to do was practice a little bit longer and the finger movements get a bit easier. It's like, okay, that's great, but I want to go to the next level, so how do I do that? And that's where the hard practice comes in. Same thing with strength training. What people tend to do is they'll do it for a couple of weeks. They tend to get a little bit stronger. And that's just because they're getting a bit more technically proficient. But once they reach the point of needing to progressively overload, which I'll get into, but once they reach that point of trying to progressively do more, which is the way that we get results with strength training, you do a little bit more than last time, or a little bit harder than last time. It's an easier way of putting it. But if we're giving the body that signal, it's a pretty good signal to be building muscle, to be in a pro-hormonal state. If you just get them lifting some weights, it does some wonders for their hormonal balance in a sense, especially with female clients. Oh my God, my skin's cleaned up and it's only been 2 weeks. Absolutely. Or my cycle is now regular. I can't tell you how often I hear that. And there's something quite mind-blowing, especially being a bloke, quite honestly, because it's not something throughout my entire formative years I had to worry about. But seeing the difference that can make for people is like, holy moly, there is definitely something below the surface that I cannot see until I do.
The older we get, the more important that becomes.
Yes,
because unfortunately, again, when we look at the men and look at the role of testosterone, and we sort of accept, oh yeah, the older we get, the less testosterone there is. That's a bullshit argument. No, we can very much impact that. Strength training gives us a rise of 30% of your testosterone levels. The other thing, of course, is good sleep, but there are a number of other things, from nutrition to a whole range of things. Your obesity, dropping that down, if you get rid of those 10, 20, 30 kilogram, then suddenly your testosterone comes up. Ta-da, surprise. And whilst we as men think testosterone, good shit, for women, testosterone equally plays a role. And when you look at the impact strength training on testosterone in women, it's again, we see about a 10% rise, and it makes the world of a difference. So this is so beautiful to see. And nowadays we get increasing data that supports us there. So this is no longer Larry-fairy, some gym trainer thinks that up, but it is actually, we've got the science to prove that. The sports scientists, thank you guys out there, whoever is doing all those studies. I'm grateful to you, because with that we can cut through the bullshit, and we can actually recommend patients and clients to do the right thing, to become the best version of themselves. We can rectify so much of that metabolic chaos in us by doing the right things, and exercise and strength training is a huge part of that.
That brings up a really important point, I think. If people listening don't remember anything else, try to remember this. If we're looking at what's considered an appropriate signal, or say a minimum effective signal or dose of exercise versus a maximum recoverable dose of exercise, the difference between your minimally effective dose and your maximally recoverable dose, not effective, recoverable, that just means you get back on your feet, not making any improvements, just get back to normal. The difference between that is huge. We're talking a difference between, say, for a given body part, if we're talking resistance training, let's just say for your legs, that could be the difference between around 4 sets per week and 30 or more sets per week. So there's a big range of what people can do there, and I think that creates a lot of confusion for people, because they go, well, some people say low volume, some people say high volume, so what's the right dose for me? The answer, generally speaking, start low, don't be a dick and start with the highest you can possibly tolerate, because generally that's not going to create a nice signaling environment for you. I don't know, let's take learning piano. If you're learning something, you don't just open up to a grade 8 piece by Chopin and go like, well, here you go, you want to learn piano, so here's the hardest one that you can do. And that tends to be how we think with exercise. We go, well, what exercise is going to kick my ass, Stefan? Give me the one that's going to lead me to get me walking out the gym feeling sweaty and accomplished in myself. In which case, I appreciate the attitude from that person, but we need to start them a little bit lower. And that can be a little bit demoralizing for some people. Is this enough for me?
Yeah.
I would highly encourage you, especially based on the experience that I've had myself, in terms of some of the struggles I've gone through with not just overtraining, chronic overtraining, resulting in REDS, relative energy deficiency syndrome, but if you're starting with a minimum effective dose, that meaning just a few sets per body part, a few times per week, generally 2 full body workouts, they shouldn't take you longer than about 40 minutes for the average person. That's generally a good recommendation.
Nice.
If we're starting there, there's always room to go up. And what it means is that if we start with a minimum effective dose, the yield that you're getting off of that is far higher than anything if you try to go to essentially a hero dose of exercise. If you're going for double that, the returns you might get on it are only, say, 5%. And is it really worth it? You know, we're talking a risk of potentially damaging your health and a risk of spending too much time away from other important things like your family, your job, or things you enjoy, you know, your passions, your hobbies and whatnot. If you're spending time away from those just to try and get a 5% increase from exercise, is it really worth it? You know, that's something that people should think about. I think for the average person, they should just know that overtraining is a potential, you know, thing that could come at them. It could rear its ugly head, but most people will know about it when it starts to come on if they've started from a good place. If you're starting with the absolute most you can tolerate, how could you possibly tell where the limit is?
We could circle back to the very first things we've discussed. If you find yourself doing a minimum of 3 Zumba classes and then some running on the treadmill every day, then I'm asking you, what are you running away from? Or
Yes.
what is
Yeah.
why
I liked
are
what
you
I liked what you said before about the depression hates a moving target. And cynically, I thought, well, depression obviously had a good shot with me, but
and that is welcome to the club. 1 in
Yes.
3 is our lifetime chance. 1 in
Yeah.
3, and you just ticked it off early. Hey, congratulations! It took a little while, and I think I'm far more of with fear avoidance and greetings from the PTSD. So it's great. We all can talk actually honest and open about it. But I think that one of the best things that we can do is become more resilient to the external stresses, become more resilient because trauma and drama is just waiting around the corner. It's just waiting. You think you've got it sorted? Give it 5 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
But if you are in a body that is healthy because you looked after it and you've created a series of habits that altogether actually create joy. I strongly believe that joy is not an emotion that sort of happens, but it's a series of habits with which you come to a point where there's a smile on your face. And I think that is so beautiful. And strength training and exercise is part and parcel of it. I loved
Yes.
what you said. I just wanted to say that the emotional component again, because what drives us is sometimes so important that we don't forget that. And because there is the risk that you then run away from something and really damage your body, that you really go all out. And that's, I mean, the extreme versions is then really the long distance runners where women completely stop having a period at all. They are just so overtrained and they're just pushing the limits to the extreme. When you start with no exercise whatsoever, you have got a very high risk of mortality. That's right. So you start doing some exercise, that risk of mortality and morbidity comes down. Then it stays a bit down where you sort of do more and more exercise. And then when you come to a point when you even push the exercise, it goes back up. Your mortality goes back up. Your risk goes back up. Most of us will not have that risk of running too much or doing too much. Let's be honest about that.
Even based on the data, it's quite an intuitively easy thing to do to go to a point where you're doing too much for yourself at your current fitness level as well. And that can throw a lot of people off. It's a little bit different to talking about chronic overtraining where someone, as you say, is really pushing the limit. We tend to see that more so in there's a very small subset of the population that just pushes it to the extreme. I've been one of those people. I've seen those people. I can tell you most people are not like that. Most people have not got the same screws loose in that department of things. I can tell you now that myself and those same people I'm referring to If they had gone down any other sort of path in life, that would be an extreme in something else. Perhaps maybe it's not something as socially acceptable, like doing drugs on the street, or that tends to be, it's a similar kind of thing. It can be an addiction for some people, and what definitely was for me.
I love it. I love it that you say it like that. Let's come back to maybe sort of more Joe Bloggs, and there is this kind of problem: no pain, no gain. You need to be in pain afterwards. Only then is that a signal that your muscles have had enough of small damage and that they grow. What do you say to that? Is that the right way to go, or am I actually setting myself back when I train to the moment that I'm actually saying, oh, I can't walk the next day?
I think the latter option is probably not smart for anyone, Stefan. I mean, like, I've been there, training to the point of, waking up the next day unable to move or just in chronic pain. I'm like, is that really good? When you say no pain, no gain, that's quite interesting. That was more of a thing thrown around in the very much the 70s and 80s by the looks of things, but it's like,
but I show my age where I started training. Come on.
It's I've grown up in a objectively softer generation of people where it's like, you were in PE class, it was like, oh, you forgot your uniform, that's okay, whatever, it's like, if you'd done that 30 years ago, it was like, get out there, and you experience that in sport, whatever. But in terms of how we classify pain, that actually, I might give you an answer you're not expecting here, but I like to break down pain into good pain and there's bad pain. Good pain, you're doing a set of bicep curls. It starts to burn a little bit in the muscle. You reach your last rep, you really struggle to get it up. You're squeezing. Oh, fuck, that's sore. And then you bring it down. Say that's good pain. Okay. On the other hand, you're halfway through your set doing the same bicep curl with the same weight. You're going, and all of a sudden you get a hot shooting pain through your shoulder. It goes up through your thoracic outlet, goes into the back of your head, and you go, oh, that was weird. That's what we would call bad pain, because the first type as a personal trainer makes me go, sweet, we're in the right place. The second type makes me go, fuck.
That's right.
It's not fantastic.
You ripped a tendon or you really triggered a nerve. You're quite right.
Some type of nerve pain. So there's lots of, generally speaking, pain comes from so many different things. I'm not a pain expert, but generally speaking, pain is a lot more complex than I think people give it credit for. So for some sense, let's take two hypothetical people. This might be a good way to explain it. So you've got Jo. She's 35, 50 kilograms overweight, really struggling. And she is coming to the gym for maybe it's her second week, or she's just really finding her feet. She's got a plan from her trainer, and today the trainer said you need to go on the Stairmaster for 20 minutes and do some stretching afterwards. So she gets on the Stairmaster, and by 10 minutes in, her lungs are in pain. She's breathing, huffing and puffing, going, oh my God, I want to step, and there's nothing more that I want right now than to step off the Stairmaster. In that sense, I would say yes, no pain, no gain, because the pain that she's experiencing in that regard, those are all the check boxes. I hate to say this, but for the vast majority of people, exercise can be really freaking uncomfortable. Pushing yourself to the point where you're going beyond what you've done previously, even in an acceptable dose, can be really uncomfortable. If I put you through a 10-minute HIIT workout where I just get you to do 10-second sprints with 20-second rest on an assault bike, by the end of that 10 minutes, you're going to be gassed. You're going to be completely, lungs just on fire from doing something like that. And so that's one example there. And then we've got, let's call someone Jake. He's a bit younger, full of energy. He's no pain, no gain. And he's getting in there. And he goes and trains his legs because he wants really big legs, as most guys tend to ignore and not train them. But he goes to the point of doing 20 sets. Gets to the 20th set. That's, just screaming reps out, getting absolutely throttled in the gym, basically. And he goes home and goes, wow, that was a great workout. It was so painful. It was fantastic. The next day he wakes up and he's like, my legs are sore. And he wakes up the day after that and they're even more sore. And it goes on for a few more days, only to then do it again the following week. In that case, physiologically, you did too much. If you're at the point where you're sore in a particular muscle for around 7 days, I would be very confident in saying that was probably a non-functional overreach, because you've reached the point where your muscle damage is so high that your body can't even worry about adapting to the stress you put it under. All it's worried about is repairing. It's like, man, you fucked my quads up, like you've screwed them.
Yep,
Can you
you're right.
repair them? And
You're right.
like we need to get them back up to baseline before we can even think about putting stuff on top of that.
Mm.
And so in that case, I guess what I would advise the listener to do is to think, which one of those two people did you feel like you were closer to? If you feel like you're a bit closer to old Joe over here, who's, just struggling a little bit because things are difficult. In some sense, the more that you get used to conquering that in each workout that you do and keeping yourself in check with it, that is going to bring tremendous personal growth. And I've seen that countless times in people going through that process of this sucks, but I'm going to do it anyway. And they get through it. And then they realize, hang on a minute, last week it was really hard. And this week I'm doing a bit more and it feels just as hard. But last week I did it. I got through it. I can do it again this week. And that can create such a positive snowball effect for someone. Likewise, on the other hand, you get some people who just tend to push things to the limit in whatever they do. I'm very much one of those people. I'm not sure about yourself, but you do strike me as someone who tends to make things as good as possible, and sometimes that means going as hard as possible. And that's an okay trait to have. That's something that will bring you a lot of success if you're in the right field and you apply it to the right things. So for that person, it might just be a different type of training modality like HIT, or doing something with a bit more intensity focus could be good for them as long as the other variables are managed. So it's more so in a case of, well, there's going to be some pain in exercise, absolutely. So first of all, know whether it's good pain or bad pain. If you're getting shooting nerve pain, it's probably not great. Likewise, if you're doing some squats and your legs are starting to burn a bit, chances are you're in the right place. That's the kind of pain you'll be chasing for the rest of that set and then thinking about throwing up for 2 minutes afterwards. But those are the types of things that we're looking for as more indicators that you're in the right place. It's like, okay, you're doing bicep curls and you've got pain in your hip. That shouldn't be happening. So then you can look into things there. But in the case of most people, I think this is going to sound really terrible, but the vast majority of people, if only they could be shown what they could do if they can push past that pain barrier. I think it would be mind-blowing for the majority of people. Just to be able to see what they're capable of doing would be quite inspiring for them.
And we see that with both extreme athletes, and we see that with tier one operators, sort of the kind of special forces dudes, who are really going out there and pushing the limits of their endurance, what is possible. And from those kind of people, we sort of get the rough idea that when you think you could not possibly do one more rep or one more thing, that you're really only at about 40% of what you really could do. And that is the amazing thing.
Yeah, we see that in the RIR studies as well. So there's for people who have no idea what I just said, in resistance training literature, we're looking at how well people can predict or can guess, essentially, how many reps they've got left with a given load. So if we give them an estimated, say, we work out what weight they can do on a bench press for 10 reps with maximum effort, and you give that to the person and you say, okay, go until you think you've got about 5 more reps left. They'll go, oh, okay, it's getting hard. Yeah, I think I've got about 5 left. On average, they get about double what they expected they had left. That's generally speaking, like with most populations. They'll get to the 5 reps that they, thought they had, and then they'll do an extra 6 or 7. And so then you realize, oh my goodness, the average person just has no idea what they're capable of doing. And I think with a bit of experience, you tend to tap into these different levels of whereabouts am I in terms of how much I've got left in the intensity. The more you do it, the better you get at it. But there comes a point where you realize, okay, this is where I feel like I've got 50% left in the tank, but I've actually got 70. There's a bit more here. And it takes a little special something to go from what I would call a voluntary point of failure, which is where you're pushing something, to momentary muscular failure with a weight set. And then there's psychotic failure. That's like you're thinking of all your childhood trauma. It's like you're pulling a car off your kids or something just to complete the exercise. You're amazed at how often people call upon that type of psychological arousal, if you want to call it that, how often they call upon something like that just to complete regular exercise. In which case I'd be like, interesting, perhaps there could be some other things to look into here besides your shape of your muscles. Seems like you need to go to some therapy or something, but... That's it really depends on the person, I guess.
I love it the way you say it like that. We need to be quite clear about one thing, that those people who are very competitive and suddenly think, oh, I'm young again, look what I can do. Well, what you probably do is you maybe throw out the amount of exercise, the reps out there, but in reality, are you doing them actually in the quality movement that you should do? Or
Yes, yeah.
is your form shrinking and getting worse and worse, and your risk of injury is getting more and more because you're no longer controlling, let's say, your dumbbells or your whatever weights you're having? It is
Yeah.
a very slippery slope there. So, and I guess that's where a trainer comes in, who can see that your form is slipping and who can maybe
Yeah.
manage you in a far safer way than you just going out there and think, oh, I know what to do. I can do that myself. I don't need
Yeah.
anyone. So that's where
Yeah.
maybe the home gym,
Much a
eh?
Yeah, it's much like a good driving instructor. I would say that a good personal trainer shouldn't be in your life for much longer than a few years, unless you're
Oh,
just great
nice.
friends with them, of course.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if you're hiring a trainer, I would hope that they're showing you how to do these things independently.
Yeah.
Not just the here's your dumbbells, we're doing some chest press, but the hey, when you're on your own, this is how you can safely get them up to your shoulders. You know, you
Nice.
place them on your knees and you
Nice.
roll them back. And
Yep.
there's a way of doing things that you learn. It's part science, it's also part art. It's different for different people. I think that's
Oh,
where the
true.
confusion comes from. But
Nice.
generally speaking,
Nice.
if you've got a personal trainer and they're just telling you this is the weight that you're doing,
Yeah.
and then they give it to you and they're like, okay, go for it, and they might tweak your form a little bit. I'll be asking some serious questions there just because you need to be able to have that self sufficiency, I suppose, because there's going to be a lot of times in your life where you are the only barrier and the only motivator for getting your exercise done. And if that means you're at your home gym with your little set of dumbbells, I would hope that you've learned up until that point how to do that for yourself. As you say, we've got so many tools now too that can help people if they're looking to do things at home. You can record your sets and send that to a PT over the internet. You couldn't do that 20 years ago,
True.
which is not perfect, but it's certainly a lot better than what we had. And I think people are also just coming a bit more aware in terms of exercise form as well. As you say, like there comes a point where people go, I need a little bit of help working out how to do this. Some people can go for 20 years without realizing that they've been doing a certain thing wrong. And that can be quite like, oh, really? Once you realize, it's like, oh, damn it.
Maybe not necessarily wrong, but maybe inefficient. Okay, so if
Yeah.
you think about constantly doing your flexion exercises and never really going to the stretching the muscle all the way out, and then there you get so much gain by using the muscle in a different way by
Yes. Yeah.
doing different timing for eccentric and concentric movements. It is so much there, and it might all sound very confusing for you guys out there who haven't seen a gym for a few decades. But bottom line is, I guess when we boil it down to is there are so many misconceptions. There's so much bullshit out there. And Alex here is certainly a man who I would trust my body to. And tell us about the Strive 20, because obviously you have tried to put all these informations into a system that is actually highly efficient, which is beautiful. So tell us a bit about your system.
What if I could make a program that generically, is as close to as possible as where I would put someone if they had come to me and said, I only have 20 minutes a day and I want to lose body fat, build muscle, and feel the best I've ever felt. And that was the idea for conception of Strive 20. It was, how can we give people insanely effective resistance training programming that's applicable to a very wide range of people with all of the tools and resources that they need to customize it and keep it for themselves. The big thing that I see with a lot of PTs is, here's your program. When the 12 weeks is up, come get your new program. It's not, here's your program. Here's why I've written the program the way I've written it. Here's how it applies to you, and here's how you can start to intuitively put together in your own head how you can do this. I think in some ways the PT model is a bit contradictory, because if you're a good PT, your client will no longer need you. I'm sure you can understand that to some extent. It can be quite confusing, but it's a system where I said, well, I don't want to be for psychological reasons in the gym for 2 hours a day. I want to be in and out within 20 minutes and just see how far I can go with very little. And I realized quite quickly, holy shit, you don't need a lot of this stuff, especially if you've got a bit of experience. But even for beginners, I'm talking 20 minutes a day, 5 to 6 days a week. I don't want to say I can guarantee you results, because again, it's different for bloody everyone. Some people are, lower responders to resistance training, but generally speaking, I can say that most people, I think, will find this program to be very different to things that they might have done previously.
Nice.
the way that I would condense it down is I see exercise as a tool, shouldn't be punishment. You can use that tool effectively or you can use it ineffectively. And if you can choose to do it effectively, you can do that in much less time than what you thought previously. So that's kind of the rundown of it. It's a 12-week program, by the way. I should say that for people. It's one-time payment. So you pay once and you've got it for the rest of your life. You get constant updates from me too. I try to update it every 6 months or so. But as you go through it, you're also going to be learning how you can turn that program into a program for yourself. You'll be learning about the fundamentals as well with resistance training, how we do it, sets, reps, eccentric, concentric, all the basics, and then we go a level above and we start to teach things like how do we lay out a mesocycle or a block of training for people, and how do you apply this when you've got, you know, perhaps certain barriers within your own mindset. That's probably the best way I could describe it. But funnily enough, you're the first person to blatantly ask me what the program bloody is. Most people just go, hey, like, what is this thing? Like, you know, it's like, oh, you've got...
That's beautiful, because you've trialed everything in a very intensive way over a number of years, and it's so lovely that you're saying that with the refeeding and with the bounce back of suddenly being actually overweight and seeing negative health impacts after being extreme opposite. It just shows when the pendulum sort of comes back, your body wants to try to balance itself out. It didn't like that what was happening, and but you've learned the hard way, and therefore I believe that your program is so valuable, because it has got you out of a dangerous place. And I think that dangerous place is so common. You know, more than 50% in the Western world are really needing to take control of their metabolic chaos, and your program allows that. And I always like those things that use science plus stimulate my joy and stimulate or maintain a level of excitement within me so that it doesn't become a chore. I can actually do that. It becomes a consistent part of my life, creating the habits that really stick and which will then hopefully turn me into a centenarian. I'm 58 now, and when I earlier on joked about I should go into retirement, I'm only just starting. I'm only just beginning to live. I've got another 50 years to go. And I use functional medicine and maybe biohacking, whatever you want to call it. I use whatever comes into my hands where I know I don't do harm, but I potentially do quite a bit of good. And I believe in compound interest. When I actually take care of my sleep, when I take care of my nutrition, and now take care of a sensible amount of exercise, but with those four goals in mind that we had earlier lined out, that will reduce my risk of falls. That will reduce my risk of a lot of chronic diseases. And it will make me a different person. It will make me a better granddad. I've missed the chance. I've stuffed up my kids, but it's at least now I can actually focus on another generation. And even if that doesn't work out, I can still be a role model to other people around me and actually say, look at me here. I was once upon a time 146 kilogram. I'm now heading towards the 100 kilogram. So, which means basically I will have soon shed 100 pounds, but it is not a magic cure. I didn't inject any bits and bobs here or there. No, it is actually taking control of your life. And your program allows people to do that. And your manner and the way you explain complex things allows people to come onto the ride and be less affected by fear, less affected by bullshit stuff they see on TikTok. It's lovely. So that's the nice thing when I talk to you. There is so much honesty, so much sincerity there, so much authenticity there. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful to you, man.
Waves of imposter syndrome, but I guess that's
No,
to be expected, you know.
that
like,
is normal. That is normal. I still get the same shit every single time I start a show. Every single time I see a patient, I think, "Who the hell am I?" And but that is normal.
It's the impulse to give a disclaimer every single time I talk about something. I'm going to Google this right now, actually, because I believe it was, if you don't mind, I think it was Russell Bertrand's. But if I just Google Russell Bertrand, if I just put wise man, it should come up. Please be here. I think it is. Oh, yeah, here it is. Yeah, this you just remind me of this because, in sense of, as a side note, I won't get into it, but yeah, people are going to see a lot of stuff on social media these days in relation to exercise.
Mm,
I'm very much immersed into that realm of things. It's gotten a lot better, but there's still a lot of shit out there.
mm.
Um, but it just made me think of it. The Russell, Bertrand Russell, with the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and the wiser people so full of doubts. That's probably just something to keep in mind. You'll see a lot of.
So that
It's what
means
I
that
aspire.
the two of us are then quite wise because we believe we are imposters and we doubt
Well, I'm not even sure
ourselves.
about that, so I guess it turns into this paradoxical loop of thinking. But I guess there's so many things, Stefan, that
Yeah.
I'm uncertain of, and I think that's something I could work on to a large
Nice.
degree. But
That
there's
is
also
beautiful.
there's a level of certainty that I have with some things, such as like we can agree on the basics.
Mm,
Exercise is probably a good idea for most
yeah.
people. You know, if we can't agree on that with someone, then it's like,
Mm,
okay, we might have a problem here. But the fundamentals I think people tend to agree on, which is that
mm,
exercise is a great way to improve yourself, your body, the way that you feel. Nutrition is also important. People should be generally eating whole foods,
mm,
generally choosing less refined options. Generally speaking, not saying that they're evil, just generally speaking, if you can
mm.
choose whole foods, that's a great idea. Your protein intake should probably be a bit higher than where it is right now. There's some general things which are really unsexy, but they are incredibly effective. So, in the sense that some people take some comfort in that uncertainty with things as you go through a process wherever you are right now, in the sense of you could be going in for your workout, say right now, you could be listening to this as you go into the gym or later on today, and you could be thinking during that time, am I doing this quite right? Could I be doing something a little bit better? Let those thoughts run, but don't let them steer you off the plan. It's like think of two
Nice.
separate spheres of thinking. You've got the plan, which you stick to until you're proven otherwise or you're told otherwise by
Nice.
yourself or a coach. And then you've got that separate wheel of thinking. Now you can put those ideas into a bank like, could I replace this? Could I do this instead? Don't let that so much influence the decision making that you've got in your plan. It's
Nice.
more so that as you go through in time, these things will reveal themselves to you. You're going to get a lot of stuff wrong. I've gotten so many things wrong
Yeah.
for my own personal health
Yeah.
and even for clients too.
Yeah.
As much as it pains me to say that,
Mm,
I've gotten things wrong with them. I've given them
mm,
the wrong things to do, or I've made, in hindsight, really poor suggestions to them. Um, and that can be quite demoralizing too, because you go, wow, I really
yeah.
cocked up here, but you're going to learn a hell of a lot more from that than you will from any
Yeah.
certification course or, whatever it
Always.
might be. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but there
No,
you go.
no. Look at it. Look at it positively, though. Also, this
Mm,
is a trajectory that. Wrong. This is a journey. Let's call it a
mm,
journey because that journey of you living your life to the fullest will be hugely influenced by things that happen along the way. That
mm,
might be injuries, or there might be something else that is influencing you, suddenly a new shift pattern, or something like that. And
mm.
whilst it worked out perfectly with your gym so far, you might suddenly find yourself on business trips where there is no more gym.
Yes,
And
yeah.
you might actually have to say, well, hang on. So, how else can I now cross train? Or
Mm,
what else can I do to maintain the fitness? Maybe there's
yeah.
now a phase in my life where I move more to bodyweight exercises, or maybe to more fun exercises in the sense of, hey, I start now seriously training with my dance partner for a
Mm,
competition. Now that's a
mm.
workout and a half,
Oh,
especially if
yes.
you
Oh, yeah.
exactly. So, it is there might be times that are changing, and that is good.
Mm,
So let's accept it for what it is. But the same principles, the same four goals that we set with regards to flexibility, with regards to balance, with strength and aerobics, they still are there. They're still applicable. And it's just different circumstances might guide you towards different paths to that. So only
yeah.
because there's change does not mean necessarily that there's something bad there. It's just
Yeah.
there is change. Okay,
Mm.
let's go out there and live our life to the fullest. So where can people find you?
Go to strivetrainingsystems.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Alex Ewen, AlexEwen with an underscore at the end.
The Strive training program is one example how we can use indeed the principles of the power team in the best possible way. I
Mm,
always want to surround myself with people where I am the dumbest person in the team. Have people around you like coaches, like doctors, like whoever is important for you at this moment in time. Don't try to reinvent the wheel but actually look at people who have been in similar situation than you and have figured ways out that are the most effective way of you to go forward, trying to become stronger and better and younger, so to speak, at least biologically. So there you go. I am very interested in an efficient way to do so. And so, guys, come along for the ride, because this is an amazing ride where we all sort of infuse each other and go out there and make the best out of this world. And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with intention.